This is a beholder, one of the most iconic monsters in all of Dungeons & Dragons. It's intimidating, full of detail, and the kind of model that makes you feel like every single part needs to be perfect. And that's exactly why so many projects like this never feel finished, or worse, never get finished at all. In this video, I am not just painting a beholder. I am going to show you one decision that completely changes how you approach a model. My first step was to turn that boring zenithal prime into a colorful underpainting. Nothing crazy, just slapping down some colors to break the ice. And from there is one tool that really allows me to make the most out of all this detail, while still making sure I can finish this model in a reasonable amount of time. A makeup sponge. Last year, this tool really popped up in the miniature painting scene, as a way of creating smooth airbrush-like transitions with very little effort. Not only that, but the stamping motion you use with it also has a dry brushing effect, where you mainly catch the raised details while leaving the recesses untouched, which allows me to make the most out of this colorful underpainting. The way I like to use sponging is by first wetting the sponge and then removing all the excess water until it is only slightly damp, at the same time also making sure my paint is a bit diluted. The result, as you can see, is a very light stamping of a color that I can gradually build up to my liking. This allows me to very quickly tackle all the bulk of the model's skin, while still taking advantage of all the details and textures. And while at first glance the sponge work might give an unfinished look, we must always keep in mind that not every step needs to look finished. Some steps only need to work as a base to move you forward. With that in mind, it is even before we begin painting that we should ask ourselves, is this a gaming piece or a display piece? How much time do I want to dedicate to this model? Most beginners think a model is finished when every part looks perfect or reaches the same level. And that is why so many models never feel finished at all. My aim for this paint job is to show you where your attention should go, in order to make the most out of your hobby time. In regard to the paint job itself, working on the top half of the model wasn't as easy as the bottom, due to the presence of all the tentacles. But an easy solution for that was to cut my sponge into a smaller size and by using a pair of tweezers, move around the tentacles to place the highlights where I wanted them. For both parts of the model, I worked in two highlight stages, a base tone and then a brighter color. I was a bit more selective with the second one, while trying to cover as much ground as possible with the first, but always leaving some of the undertone visible here and there. With the sponging stage done, this is already a very good foundation to work from. However, because the sponge couldn't reach all the areas equally, especially in the deeper recesses, some parts didn't blend as smoothly and looked more like one color sitting on top of another. So I decided to tie everything together in a very simple way, by mixing my colorful base coat with the darker tones of each sponging area and adding a good amount of water. I created a pair of washes. These weren't meant only to darken the recesses, but to act as an overall filter that would tie the layers together, while at the same time reinforcing the shadows. And very importantly, while I did allow both colors to mix wet on wet where they met, I also kept an eye out on the darker blue, making sure it didn't overflow too much into the lighter brown. This is something that will naturally happen when working with washes, as gravity will always pull such diluted paint downward. Whenever that happened, I simply cleaned my brush and blended everything back upwards, this way reinforcing the transition area. And if necessary, I also applied a bit more of the lower wash around that section. With the washes dry, I now have a very smooth and colorful foundation from which I can begin to add details. But this is the part where most people make the mistake of overworking their models. While creating a foundation through simple techniques is quite approachable for a beginner, once we move into the detailing stage, it is very easy to fall into the trap of trying to make every surface perfect, chasing tiny flaws and losing sight of the big picture. Other creators might tell you that they simply added highlights from this point forward, but I believe there is much more to gain by focusing on the mindset behind those details, because not every detail deserves the same amount of time. Some details, like the face and the areas around the eyes and mouth, I am going to push a bit further, while the back or the underside of the model I am mostly going to leave as they are. It is up to us to decide where our time goes, and more paint doesn't necessarily mean better results. When I look at this model, there's a clear place that catches my eye, and that is where I need to push through in order to get the most out of my time, even when progress feels slow or boring. If we manage to push through that boredom just once, and break the barrier of working on an area longer than we normally would, That's when we begin to realize what we're truly capable of. But if we try to do that on every single part of the model, that's when we give up halfway through. I didn't give the blue and light blue highlights the same amount of care I did on the rest of the fleshy face. And the truth is, if I had given them more time, it would have made the model a bit better. But it would also have made the process less fun for me. Just some simple highlights and a big jump in contrast on the second highlight is more than enough to call that area complete. It is more important than the back or the bottom of the model, but not as important as the mouth. That is where not only I push my highlights again with 2 colors, like I've done throughout this whole model, because I consider 2 highlight layers enough to create a strong definition, but I also added a heavily diluted red wash. This helped me separate the inside of the mouth from the rest of the facial skin, giving me 3 clear focal points: the mouth, the face, and the top of the head. Before we move into the final, most detailed part of this paint job, I want to quickly share where this beholder comes from. It is part of Dungeon of Despair Chamber of the Mage, a massive 3D printable dungeon system launching today on Kickstarter. It combines a full dungeon crawl campaign compatible with D&D 5e, with modular tiles, immersive terrain, interactive props, and over 40 highly detailed miniatures. Everything is designed as one complete system. The book tells you what's in the room, the terrain lets you build it instantly, and the miniatures bring it to life on the table. You print what you need, build what you imagine, and no dungeon ever plays the same way twice. If you love classic dungeon crawling, storytelling at the table, or just want incredible miniatures to paint, Chamber of the Mage is definitely worth checking out. I have included a referral link in the description if you want to take a look and support the campaign. In the past, I talked about choosing one exciting detail, and how pushing through on one area of a model is where true growth and improvement happens, not by being satisfied with the bare minimum. And on this beholder, the eye is that detail. While the whole model isn't painted to this level, it is this part that carries the story. It is where the viewer will look first. It is where everything else quietly points towards. And this is where the process changes. Up to this point, speed and efficiency mattered. Getting color down, building contrast, and making progress. But now, progress looks different. Now it's not about how fast I move. It's about how long am I willing to stay, because this stage asks something else from you. It asks for patience, focus, and most of all, it asks you to stay present. Even when the excitement fades and only effort remains. You will feel the pressure here. You will feel the urge to stop. You will tell yourself it is good enough. You will wonder if pushing further even matters. And that moment is where most people walk away. Not because they can't go further, but because they don't feel comfortable with what going further requires. This is the edge of your comfort zone. And right here, something important happens. You stop painting to finish the model, and start painting to improve. You notice your habits, you notice when you rush, and you notice when you avoid certain areas because they feel difficult or intimidating. And suddenly, this tiny eye is no longer just a detail on a miniature. It becomes a mirror. It shows you how you respond to a challenge, whether you retreat or whether you stay. If you try to paint every part of your model like this, you'll burn out. But if you choose one thing to push, you'll grow. Because growth doesn't come from doing more. It comes from choosing where to care more, from placing your energy with intention instead of spreading it thin across everything. This is where restraint becomes a strength, where leaving some areas simple allows one area to truly shine. And that choice, that decision, is what separates a painted model from a meaningful one. And it is at this moment where the finish line changes. At first, finished means done. Then it means clean, and then it means impressive. But eventually, finished means honest. Honest to what you wanted this model to say, and honest to the time you chose to invest. I chose to go further, not because the model asked me to, but because I decided to. Because every time we choose one place to push, we rewrite what we believe we are capable of. We prove to ourselves that we can stay, that we can struggle without quitting, that we can grow through focus and not force. And when you finally step back and look at your work, you're not just seeing a better paint job. You are seeing the quiet evidence of patience, intention, and the courage to go one step further than you did last time. And that is what this eye represents. Not perfection, but purpose. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. This was the 4th video in the beginner series I started earlier this year. Next week, I'll be back to more general painting tips, but if there's any beginner topic you'd like to see me cover in the future, let me know in the comments. And before you go, don't forget to check out Dungeon of Despair, Chamber of the Mad Mage. Collaborations like this not only support the channel, but make me realize how much it has grown.